Hey everybody, welcome back. I know it's been a little bit, but we're gonna do some more D&D discussions, trying to get that philosophy of pen and paper going. Um, so what are we talking about, Victor?
Well, I've tried to figure out how best to word this, and the title may be different than what I say now if you figure out a better way to word it. But what I've called it is DM and player dynamics during character and campaign creation.
Yeah,
Mouthful, but that's also because this is a topic that is often talked about in very separate details and parts, but it's never put together as a cohesive whole in any one discussion, far as I can tell. I've been trying to find something that is more specific to this topic, and I can't even find a more figure out a more well phrased,
yeah.
more concise way to say it.
To put it in the most basic terms that I can, it would be what are the roles and responsibility for DMs and players when deciding what you're gonna play?
Yeah, that is a more immediately understandable version of what I said.
It doesn't cover the
No.
breadth of what we're actually going to cover here, but I
Yeah.
think it's a good introduction to what we're doing.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's understandable why it becomes so divided, because it's also a very wide topic, but it's also something where everything interacts with everything else so much that it's hard to get a good overall view when you're only looking at the individual components. You need the components, but then you need to look at the whole, and then after you've looked at the whole, you can look at components again, and so on and so forth.
And I know basically every video we do is about basically there's no right answer, but we're
Yes.
gonna sit here and cover it as much as possible. And I think this is a really good example of like I think everybody can agree that there's no right answer to this, as opposed to some other
Mm.
aspects that we talk about that there's absolutely no right answer for this. But I think you're leaning in the right direction, and I think we're both on the same page that it has to be an extremely collaborative effort, at least to
Yes.
some
Yes.
degree.
Yes. And even if the framework behind which things start out are different, that's worth considering as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if we first try and look at some components and see how we can connect them, for if we take one example, how does a campaign come to be to begin with? Well, if we look at on the DM side of things, we have a spectrum of what could happen. We could have either a GM that's GM or DM. I keep mixing back and forth. Anyway, you know
In,
what I'm talking about.
interchangeable unless we're talking about copyright.
Yeah, and on the one hand, we have the approach of this is the campaign premise, this is the setting and its rules. I want to run a campaign in this with these rules. And then we have the other end of the spectrum, which is a GM that brings together a group of people and says, "What do you want to play?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're only on that side. And there's also all, of course, an infinitesimal number of points between these two extremes.
Yeah, we always talk
But
about stuff that's on a gradient scale.
yeah, but these are some examples to get an idea of the span of it.
Yeah,
And uh,
I'm very much a DM who really prefers to go in knowing what I'm, like this is something that I'm excited about, and I would like to share this with my players. Um, Usually, if a player is excited about something different, my reaction is often, okay, why don't you DM it? Um, that's just kind of how it is. Not that somebody couldn't sway me and make me excited about a setting that they're excited about, but the common thread for me is if you're excited, run it.
yeah, and traditionally and generally speaking, the dynamic is often that the GM is the one who holds the reins and begins the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
There are other examples and other circumstance, but that's generally the GM is expected to be the one to bring the most to the table to begin with. Whether that's a good or a bad thing very much depends on the people you're playing with.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
my track record has definitely proven that the two most important questions to ask when you're trying to decide this among your players is tone of what kind of setting you're trying to run and what commitment level that you're working with.
yes, yes, those are absolutely vital. The And I mean that's one of the advantages of going for the this is what I want to run approach, because you can set those expectations to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
You have a party made up, and then you try to figure something out, you're probably going to find that people aren't coming to you saying, all the people aren't coming to the GM with the same expectations or ideas, spoken or unspoken.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Is when you're having these discussions, I would implore you, even if you guys are sitting down at a table, to either have one person or multiple people taking notes on what was discussed and kind of have those as a reminder, because 6 months down the road, a lot of people may have forgotten what was originally agreed upon, and that may have some people put off slightly.
Yes.
For instance, if you have players who are not showing up on time, and that was kind of like a point of contention for a majority of the group, is like, hey, you guys, you need to make sure that you're here 15 minutes early, or whatever it is you pose. Even small things like that can begin to put pressure on an already difficult hobby to maintain.
Yeah, and there's also the well, we mentioned the tone, we've mentioned the scheduling, which is the grandest bane of all campaigns as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, everybody has to be on board with what the pacing's supposed to be.
Yeah. Something that I keep finding myself, I don't know if it's worrying about or if it's because I've noticed that I have this problem myself, in that I might get a bit, as a GM, I might get a bit too engaged in the idea, so the concept and the stuff I want to put forth, and so I still interweave the players and their characters, but sometimes I get too engaged in the things I want to happen, the things I want to show, and the conversations I want there to be and such, that I forget to actively engage rather than just involve my players sometimes, and there's a risk in that, of course.
Yeah, it's kind of the difference of using your players as forward progression of the scene rather than having them be a backdrop of the scene.
Yes, I'd made that mistake a few times.
Of course. I still make that mistake every night here and there.
Yeah. And on the other end, we have the problem where a GM comes and says, what do you want to play, to a party that doesn't really know what they want to play, or none of them wants to play what the other one wants to play.
Yeah, I feel that's a really good point, because often players have no idea what they want. I think that is a truth that goes beyond D&D as well, that basically consumers don't know what they want for the most part. But players, it's really hard to say that they're not consumers of the media that you're putting forth, and also the media that one another's putting forth as well. But they often don't know what is fun for them, and you will find out, maybe to your chagrin, weeks into the campaign, is like, oh, they said they like doing extreme role playing, but really what they like is tactical grid combat. They said they liked this because that's what you're kind of supposed to say nowadays. Like that's what is expected of you. But
yeah, there's been a survey or something, I can't remember when, where they asked what kind of coffee do people like, and everybody says a warm dark roast, but when you actually look what people actually buy, they buy the same regular cup of coffee swill that everybody else does, and nobody goes for the warm dark roast, because a warm dark roast is what sounds good and what everyone wants to say that they are into.
Yeah, it goes into group psychology a little bit there, and kind of being able to see that and figure that out early is a useful skill, but that's kind of a high-tier skill for a DM to have, to figure that out.
Yeah, and there's also another aspect we need to go into, and we've touched upon it a little bit, but that's the topic of lethality, because that is very, very important to consider, because, well, the classical debate that you can often have is the balanced party argument. We need a tank, we need a healer, we need insert perceived necessity here. When, okay, if you're playing a game with high lethality, where you need to have a team that can perform and the GM is not going to pull any punches and what happens in the battlefield happens, then okay, maybe then you can consider these things and see about figuring those out. But if you're doing that and you've got a GM who is has no interest in putting you through that.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically preparing yourself in vain for something that's not going to show up.
And I think a really important question when you're on the topic of lethality is, and really good to be a barometer for your players, is like, okay, if you have a character who is unconscious, do you think it is okay for the DM to control a monster to attack that unconscious player character?
Yeah, that is
And
the axis around the whole, around which the whole the Colvillian, the golem stamps on your head to make sure you're dead discussion.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So to me, that's like, that's the question that you pose to your players. Is like, are you opposed to this happening? And the gradient for that one would be, should every enemy fight like that? Or do you want something in the middle, or do you want where they basically will skip you if you're unconscious?
Yeah.
And
And on the topic of lethality, I myself have never thought myself as a fan of high lethality, and still to this day that is true, that I am not a big fan of high lethality, but I think it's absolutely worth it to at least try it once in your gaming career, or however you want to describe it. I was in your West Marches campaign for about a year. I said from the outset of after the very very first session of the entire game that I don't know about this, so I'll stay. I might stick around, but I don't know for how long. I ended up sticking around for a year, but once a couple of characters of mine died in relatively quick succession, and I didn't feel like some of them got the kind of ending that I wish they would have.
mm-hmm.
I was sort of done with it, but I'd still gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it, and it was a very interesting experience.
Yeah, it's a different way to play than I think a lot of contemporary players are
Yeah.
used to. But I don't know. Maybe the times are changing for that as well. I've seen a lot more uh, PC death talked about on the annals of the internet.
Yeah, and for anyone who may not still not know what West Marches means, it's basically roguelike D&D. If you know what that means, you can look it up further if you wish.
Yeah, it's not a hard Google.
Yeah.
But one of the most important skills that a DM has is with all of these. So there's so many things that changes the parameters of your campaign, but inevitably something is not going to work for the entire party, or a specific individual, to include the DM, is not abiding by what kind of was agreed upon. And what do you do when that happens? How do you deal with that, and how do you move forward and not just blow up the whole campaign?
Yeah, yeah, because that is a very that is the kind of thing that is very much a campaign ender if you find out that people had very different ideas of what the lethality level should be at.
Yeah, I recently had two players in a campaign that they were great people. I loved being around them. They were a joy to be, at the table and all that. But just because life happens, they were often either missing or late to sessions. And on top of that, when they were in session, despite previously agreed upon tone, they were very action oriented and had a lot more whimsical nature to their style of play. And there's nothing inherently wrong with those, but it definitely wasn't what myself and the rest of the party agreed upon like 5 months prior when we started, that we wanted a little bit more of a serious lean to it. And it was one of those things where I was like, hey, does everybody else, I took the portion of the party that was not involved in that, and I said, hey, does everybody else feel the same way I do? And they were like, yeah, So I talked to them on multiple occasions. I gave them a chance. I was like, hey, this is what we talked about. This is what we're looking for. Let's see if we can work towards that. I gave them actionable goals, like, fill out more than one sentence of your backstory. Let's see if we can get more seriousness because you're getting into your character. And fill out traits, fill out, all these. And then over multiple sessions, these things, there were obvious attempts, but I could still tell that they weren't as happy as they would be in a more pulp style game. So eventually I just asked them, I was like, hey guys, nothing against you, but I think we should probably end your time in the campaign, just because I think you'd be happier looking for another group that has a lower commitment level and a higher action level. And they agreed. They were on board. They were like, cool, I appreciate you talking to us.
Yeah, and that's a very good example of how to handle things when you've gone down the line and started finding this out. At what point should you say this isn't working while you are making a campaign or making a part, or the party is sitting down to make characters, and one person absolutely wants to play a character that doesn't fit the tone or doesn't fit the setting or something like that?
Yeah, it's it's really important to it's that top tier skill of being able to read the table. Often as a DM, you have to be able to look in individual scenes and see people's reaction to, like, you can almost feel it coming off of them once you get to that level of being able to read it, where you're like, they're like, come on, this again, or we're doing, this is not what I was here for. You could see, the kind of looking down, the tapping of stuff, getting bored with these effects. And it doesn't just have to be with people who are acting differently at the table, but maybe people who are too serious, too melodramatic. Maybe there are people that are hogging spotlight. And they're going on 10-minute tirades in character, and that's not the way everybody else plays. Maybe people like very quippy, quick stuff and then just stick to the mechanics. But you need to be able to read people, because they're not always going to tell you. Players are notorious liars. That at the end of every session that you ask, how was how was session for you? They're going to say it was great. And then they're going to get in their car, and then they're going to talk to the person they carpooled with and be like, that was an awful session, wasn't it? That's everybody. That's everybody. That's every player. Even if you're a seasoned DM, 20 years, you go to somebody else's table, you have a terrible time, you're going to be nice. You're going to be like, oh, no, this is a great session. And then you're not going to show up again. So,
yeah. See, I don't know if you can tell me if you don't have this experience with me, but in my experience, I at least try and be, well, while not brutal, I try and be honest about that kind of stuff. But I may not do that in front of the entire party, but
yeah.
I will get in touch with the GM and say, I don't know how I felt about this or that, or I'm not sure about that thing or something. I'm not sure if I can think of a great example right now.
Yeah,
but,
I think people get it, but I've done that as well. I usually wait a couple sessions, because sometimes, you can never tell.
Yeah.
It's a really, like, especially when you're critiquing a DM, it's one of the most difficult things that you can do, because there's so many multi-layered facets. Because you don't know if they have other plans going on where they're aware of all the blind spots that you're saying, but because of what they have behind the screen, they're not actually blind spots. So the best example I can give is like, oh, you ruled that differently than the rule book has it. And the DM could potentially just pull up, their notes and be like, nope, this is why, because it actually follows what I wrote on how that works. But I digress from that point. But
Yeah.
criticizing a DM is difficult, but I think if it's consistent over multiple sessions, you can do so. And hopefully your DM is responsive to that, because criticizing a DM can actually be the best for your campaign, and you can kind of bend it towards what you like more.
You need to be able to make it an honest discussion. It needs to, from the start, you need to try and present it as you wanting the best for everyone. It's not an attack on anyone or anything. It's a question and an expression of how you feel. That should be a fine thing to talk with your GM about.
Yeah, I know that as a DM, I have adopted for the last 2 years that at the end of effectively every act that I have in my story, so an act can be anywhere between 5 to 20 sessions, but it's the idea that the entire story arc is kind of tied up in a bow. It may not be the end of the campaign. There's more stuff that can be done, but that major arc is done. I will send out a private document to each player and say, hey, this is the things that I thought you did very well during this campaign. Usually higher concepts, like you taking care of players who didn't know their rules very well, leaning over and helping them know their character sheet. Or I noticed often when a scene would come up that you knew a player had a skill for, you would actually drag them into the spotlight and find narrative ways to do it that were interesting, where you're like, oh, I see this lock, but it looks a little bit too difficult for me, so I lean over and whisper and and bring that character into the scene naturally, or
Yeah.
any good traits that they have. I like to really preamble those on when I give those, so that they're like, oh, okay, you've acknowledged that I'm helping. And then no matter what, even if a player is considered in my eyes like a perfect player where I have no problems with them, I will sit down for sometimes hours and try to find areas of growth for them, because I want them to be a better player, not only at my table, but other tables. And also, I want to grow within them the desire to DM, because I think everybody should do it because it makes you a better player. But I give them actionable goals. Like, if you do this, this would help the campaign. If you do this, and try to give at least three. And I have found good responses from my players, that they actually like that, and they feel like it makes them better. And I sometimes they'll give them to me, and it makes me really happy when I get that engagement back.
Yeah, yeah. Like you don't always think about growth as a player. Generally speaking, you often think about character growth or character development, which is also important, and we'll get into that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But such a big thing when it comes to the development of you, the player or GM, in how you approach things and how you handle things, and when you do what. And if we turn it over to if we look at because the same spectrum that I mentioned for the DM exists as well for the player, but
Mm-hmm.
when things are on more on the extremes, there it becomes tricky and can become tricky in a completely different way. Because there we have the one poll where a player says, this is my character, here's his 10-page backstory and
Yep.
motivations, can you fit it into the campaign? And the other poll, which is what's the premise, what does the party like, what I have no will of my own, what should I do, guys?
Yeah. Um,
And
it's such a difficult question to answer, and I don't even know if many people would say that there's even like for themselves or their table that there's only one way to do it. I know that it depends on the system. It depends on what has happened with my group. That so like a group might come to me and be like, "Hey, we want to check out this country in your world. Can we start a campaign around that?" And so that's kind of like almost like a mix of the two, where it's like something I've already written, but they come to me wanting to check it out. Or it might be like, you know what, I haven't checked this out before. Do you guys, are you interested in it? Rarely do I sit down with a party and be like, and myself personally say, I have no idea what system or setting that I want to run. That's very rare for me. But sometimes people come to me and they're like, hey, do you want to play Shadowrun? And I'm like, okay. Did you guys have anything in mind? Usually they don't. And I'm like, okay, we'll do it in Chicago or something like that. But um, I
yeah,
think don't
when
pitch
when
it.
I'm thinking about what's the premise, what does the party like, I don't have a will of my own, that point is the generally that's the player who that's the player who either is extremely unexperienced or just haven't thought about
Yeah,
any part of it prior, in like more than 5 minutes prior to game.
yeah. I
Usually, there are exceptions, of course.
Yeah, I really like it when a player comes to me and like you can mention race and class. I think it can be helpful to evoke an image in the mind. But I really like it when they come to me with maybe a sentence or two of just like the premise of a character. Like this is he's a barbarian that goes on a basically infinite war in the name of their god.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. And then
Yeah.
if that minor thing talking about hooks me, then I'm like, okay, both you and I together, you'll write up something that's like, all right, here's some specifics about my character. I'll read it, and then I'll go, okay, let's twist knobs here and there, change some aspects, add on to these aspects. Here's a couple cities. Can you name these areas for me? Because I haven't done it yet, and I like to offload a lot of creative process to my players because it increases investment from them if they're like, oh, I got to make that. So, and it also makes the my personal setting really cool because eventually, my 12 plus players have all created something in the world. So when they make further characters, they get to interact with all that stuff again. And it to me creates that writing process for the collaborative writing process that everybody's looking for. But I really like that almost tennis style, getting that rally of creativity where it's like, okay, this is what I've written. Okay, let's alter those. Because as a DM, the way I write is I make sure that my that I like the story to like really wrap around the players, and so NPCs in their life are integral to the story. I still have my big bad and all that things, but there's a lot of connections, so there's a lot of investment and moral choices that go on. So that collaborative writing of a backstory and who a character is really helps make that a lot easier.
Yeah, a mistake I've done in the past is I make too many too big NPCs that aren't necessarily enemies. They're just characters that I really like too much, and I've ended up putting them too close. Well, I've ended up pumping them up too much and then just having them stand there.
Yeah. As a player, if you're writing a backstory and you really want your DM to bite off on it and take it and put it into the story, my suggestion is leave a lot of ellipses and a lot of question marks when you're writing your story. And it doesn't have to be like literal, but have that in your mind when you're doing it. A lot of unanswered questions, like where did my sister go? Or, what happened after this war? Why were these powers given to me? And have no idea, or if you do have an idea, throw that as a note to your DM. Be like, I was thinking around this area, and you can decide, both DM and player together, if you as a player want to be surprised, or if both of you want to flesh out all of it, and then it becomes something that you have the dramatic irony where you personally know, but your character doesn't. A little bit more difficult of a task. You have to use metagaming to the benefit of the scene, or you can personally be surprised by a DM who writes it in the background and kind of drip feeds you that information as sessions go on.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements to, because what I try and do, and this is basically what you were saying, is to bring flexible ideas that I can make fit into something. I've on occasions in the past, I've made characters that I have too clear or specific an idea of what they are, and it just doesn't really fully work, or something just is really off when this character behaves in a way that contradicts with either what their people are like, or what the setting expects of them, or something like that. And I mean, there's also a lot of entertainment to be gained out of not knowing enough. Well, no, not knowing, not that, not of. There's a lot of entertainment to be gained out of not knowing everything about your character or such. Like, I've made warlocks in the past with you that literally don't know what their patron actually is. And I've made, and you could do the same for other types of characters that gain power from outside sources that they maybe don't know fully what it is.
We should really do a class video playlist.
Yes, we need to do that,
where we talk about the narrative implications for each class, because a lot of people may disagree with me, but I think every single class has massive narrative implications for just choosing those in D&D. And you can mine so much just creativity from just the class alone, let alone everything else they do. Warlock is built in, it's built into it from the bones.
Absolutely.
And something that a lot of people, to slightly switch gears here, a lot of things that people don't ever talk about is who takes the notes during session.
It's more important than you might think. And like what I've been considering, and what I believe we had going in the West Marches game, was we had, of course, people had their individual notes, but we also had shared Google Docs where we had people could keep updating and adding things. It's important to not forget things, and when you end up having like a Christmas hiatus or something, it's good to be able to look back and have access to that stuff. So even if you're not the one taking the notes, it's good to make sure that you can have access to them now and then and just give them a look.
And I will say this every chance I get and in every video, have your players do the recaps. Force them to take notes. Force them to be the one to tell you. It's more important than just the recaps themselves. So it's more than just a reminder. As a DM, it allows you to sit there quietly and understand where their focus was. You hear the conversation of what they were focused on, what they're thinking, so that you as a DM can shift and pivot to say, okay, that was not what I meant, but I can roll with it. Or if it's very detrimental, you can actually correct them on something. But I would err on the side of never correcting them when it comes to that thing, and just pivot and move. And if they have more of a focus on something that you had no idea that they would be interested in, lean into those. Like, oh, they really liked this arc that was considered kind of like a subplot for me that I didn't really flesh out, but they're like really hyped about it. Maybe do some extra work there, and get them going. I think players doing recaps, one, it increases their commitment level, because they if they're going to try to remember what happened for the next session, they have to pay attention. They have to write. At least one person does, and then you get that focus information that you wouldn't normally get.
Yeah, and I think another good part of shared notes is that it can help group cohesion when you as a group sit together and go over, well, what actually happened, what did we do, and can collectively discuss and handle. Is something missing in this Google Doc where I wrote down my notes? No, you forgot this and that thing, and so on. And so people can together just build a more complete picture. And on the topic you were mentioning, where they tell and you listen, if there's something very important that they missed, use that fact, either to so that you can highlight that later, or to use it as to further drama later on when they afterwards realized, oh man, we missed that.
Yep. Or if as a DM you know that their path is closed off because they've missed that information, you just have to reseed it. It's easy. Like they gain the information from another direction, and that's
but now you know to reseed it.
Exactly. It's so for me, when players give recaps, I will give them inspiration for that. It kind of gives incentive, and in my live groups, my inspiration is candy. So people like candy. You know, it's a much more psychological impact when it's they get rewarded for doing the work of taking notes. And
it's super Pavlovian, and I love it.
yeah. It works. I really suggest people do it. Small candies, because you don't want them eating like a whole cookie or anything. Like, it takes a while. So
yeah,
and visually wrapped too. Otherwise, it's gross. But yeah. What's that next point we got?
Well, another thing that's
you're talking about experience level.
I was about to go into the point on group cohesion and making characters together.
Yeah, I think that's total. We just suffered 2 deaths in our campaign on Thursday, and one of the obviously all the same players, but one of the existing characters and one of the new characters, they're kind of writing together to have a previous connection. So that's kind of what you're talking about, that collaborative. But you can also do that from the very get-go, where all 5 kind of come together, or 4, whatever your number is. But the whole group comes together and they talk about how they want to have their group, and that doesn't have to be just mechanical; it could be narrative as well.
Yeah, because it's so important that everyone has. You don't have to have shared backstory as characters. You don't have to have. You can, of course, then that could be a big boon. But you need to at least, as a player, know what the party is like, because there is the expectation that we are playing D&D and we need to become a party. And like I've been in games where characters have literally basically just taken off in another direction because that made sense for my character in this circumstance, but it doesn't make sense if you actually want the party to gather up and actually get going on adventures, because now the rest of the group literally has to go chasing you, because that's our task, finding you earlier.
It goes back to metagaming, but for beneficial reasons. For
the right purposes.
Exactly, because you're metagaming when you say in your head as a player, oh, we need to come together and find a way to come together as a group. It might not make sense narratively right now, but you backwards engineer that rationale for your characters.
When I was trying to do research for this, I found a surprising amount of material on this is how you bring your group together so that one player doesn't say, what reason do I have not to turn around and go the other way?
Nope. That's
Why would the character turn around and go the other way when the player is literally there to play with the party?
yeah.
That expectation needs to be apparently needs to be clarified as well from the beginning.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of this until I started doing research, but apparently.
Yeah, to me, that's an asshole player. You may or may not know that he's an asshole player, but he is in fact an asshole player. It can be remedied.
Yeah.
This is not a permanent affliction.
Yeah, like even the edge lord sitting in the corner needs to have that moment where they go, I don't want to do this, but you guys are going to get yourself killed if I don't step in.
Yeah, I think a pretty textbook definition of this, and at risk of being derailed too far, a textbook definition of this that I think a lot of people are aware of that our party years back actually did was we had one player who was playing a ranger, and he was basically the typical I sit in a corner and I don't engage with anybody kind of thing. His backstory, as all edgelords, warrants a act like this, but he and the party were cognizant enough that they were able to play it out, and my writing of what was happening in the town that he was from was severe enough that he was like, I don't want to work with you all, but I have to do this, and I have to protect the town, and I can't do it by myself. And together, their interpersonal relationships during this, when they were defending this town and going into dungeons and fighting Big Bad and all that, over this short span of like 4 or 5 levels, or character levels, he began to kind of grow attached and see these party members as a family to him. And it kind of transformed this loner edgelord into he's fiercely loyal to them. Everybody else, he still acts like normal, pushing people away and being rough. But when it comes to his party mates, like he's very attached to them, and
Yeah.
that was fun to actually play through over multiple weeks and kind of see that growth happen. And it was very organic. Like we didn't talk about it session 1 or session 0, saying like, oh, this growth is going to happen. It just came out of
Yeah.
it because everybody knew that kind of deep in them that metagaming had to happen.
Yeah, your character can be the most jaded, friendless, misanthropic cynic in the world to everyone but the party.
Yep.
And as long as the party is willing to, not let you go overboard in some way, and you have the common sense not to do that because the party doesn't want you to do that, then you can make it work. You can have a party with literally like chaotic, like neutral evil Mephistopheles worshippers and paladins and stuff. And as long as they're willing to accept that we as a cohesive unit is, we're the same pack or whatever collective noun or term you want to use for it, you can make it work. There will be frictions, there will be disagreements, but as long as you can at least agree that we are the group, the party, then you can make so much work.
I think a couple to kind of try to wrap this up in a bow because we are going. I would say some questions that everybody at the table, DM and players, should be asking themselves is, am I writing and playing in a way that that continues the spirit of the group game? Are we all enjoying this? Am I doing something that builds towards all of us having a good time? If you constantly have that question in your mind, and not constantly, don't get anxiety from it, but if you are periodically reminding yourself of that and kind of checking yourself and helping other people check themselves on that, I think it would go a long way. I think
there's a difference between actively thinking of something there's a difference between not actively thinking of something and forgetting about it.
Yeah.
When you forget about it is when you act against it.
I think if you do that and understand that and kind of have the feeling, especially towards the DM, because sometimes this can be difficult, but that everybody here at this table has the best intentions for the party and for the story. Again, you have to have a lot of trust in your DM and your players respectively, because you have to. Why play with them if you don't?
Yeah.
Like you can't start on uneven footing. So have trust and be willing to invest yourself in the betterment of the game.
Yeah. And as part of wrapping up, a lot of the stuff we've talked about can be done in a session 0.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone, depending on how well you know each other and how well presented stuff is, that can be of various amounts of time and various investments. I've done the mistake of making mine too long in the past.
Yeah.
I was paranoid that I was going to forget something, but what we were trying to get at here is, I feel like it's even a step above a more generalized step than session zero, because it's about where do we, it's also about where do we come to session zero from.
Yeah, it's definitely much more of the psychology building. It's almost that session -1 where everybody's kind of getting in the right mindset and making sure they're shoulder to shoulder in this.
Yes.
And then you worry about the noodly bits like scheduling and all that stuff once you get to session 0.
Yeah, once you get to the table, so to speak, then you can. There's a lot that can be worked out, but it helps a lot to have some groundwork in your approach before you even come to the table.
Yep. Well, this one was a lot less of different takes and a lot more powwow happiness, but I think that's a good one to come back to. We've been on a hiatus, so I think it's good to have these happy little discussions and really just help people for the most part. I think that's really the only purpose of this video, is to help people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, as always, Victor. You were the best, and hopefully we'll be better about uploads. We got more ideas coming, so just got to have time in the schedule to do it.
All right. Yep. Always a pleasure.
Yep. We'll see you all next time.
See ya.